everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my weekly wrap-up of August 23rd, 2015. I don't have much to say this week. I had a very busy week. I was pretty stressed out and anxious, and I'm still not feeling super energetic. It also doesn't help that I was awake until 2 in the morning because of the Hugo Awards live show online last night, and I got pretty excited about that stuff and being on Twitter. But I didn't have a lot of time to just sit down and read this past week, and I haven't felt like doing that much either. The first thing that I read this week was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I tried to read this, I think, about 6 months ago, and I DNF'd it because I was not in the right headspace to be reading this book. I knew when I failed reading this the first time that it was me and not the book, so I always wanted to come back and try it again, and I'm very glad that I did. I read this in like 2.5 days. I finished it on my lunch break from work, and it made me cry, and then I felt like super weepy all afternoon while I was trying to work, so that might have been a tactical error on my part, but I really wanted to finish it. This has been really popular. It's been really popular on BookTube. It's been pretty hyped up. I think some of the hype has died down a little bit, and so I don't know if I need to recap it too much. It's about a flu epidemic decimates, kills off most of the Earth's population, and the storylines flip from before this apocalyptic event to 20 years after. It follows these people in their lives before and after, and how it changes them and how the world has changed. And at the heart of it is the Traveling Symphony, which is like an orchestra combined with a Shakespeare acting troupe. Their motto is "Survival is insufficient," a quote from Star Trek Voyager. And yeah, they perform for people. I think I most liked about this book was the emotional content. I mean, it made me cry. I didn't feel like I got to know all the characters incredibly well, but I felt that their situations, especially around the time of the flu epidemic, were very realistic and kind of poignant in places. And I liked also that the world after this event, it's 20 years after, and things have calmed down. I think that it's too common for dystopias or post-apocalypse scenarios to imagine a world where like every human being is turned into some sort of psychotic murderer who's fighting with everybody else over the scraps of the world, and like your life is constant danger and killing people or whatever. I think this is a bit more realistic because it might be naive to think this, but I really do think that most people, or enough people, are good at heart and want to band together and help each other and trust each other to survive rather than turning on each other. And yeah, the first couple of years after the epidemic, it said, you know, people die, horrible things happen, but it calms down. There's a kind of equilibrium reached, I think. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad that I finally came back and read it. The other book that I read this week was Hounded by Kevin Hearne. It's the first book in his Iron Druid Chronicles. It has that urban fantasy vibe with the male magical character or whatever in it. I liked reading this at the time because it's a super light and fun read. It's kind of brainless. It's not written that well. I mean, okay, I won't criticize it too much for that, I guess, but it's fun, and I needed something fun to read. And I also liked that it had to do with Irish mythology. I mean, there are lots of unpronounceable names, but it was different from other things I've been reading. I don't think I've ever read a book about a druid before, so that was kind of cool. The main character, Atticus O'Sullivan, is a 2,000-year-old druid who is living in Phoenix, Arizona. You don't read about that every day. And yeah, the plot is some odd 1,000 years ago he walked off with a magical sword, and one of the Tuatha De Danann, or Irish mythical gods or whatever, didn't like that and has been pestering him and sending minions after him trying to get it back, and then it escalates into full-out conflict in this book. it's an okay plot. But something was bothering me while I was reading this. I couldn't quite pin it down. There was something was not quite right. And I think really that it's that I don't like the way that the female characters are talked about. There are probably more female characters than male characters in this book, but quantity does not equal quality. Just because there are a lot of women in a story doesn't mean that they are treated or presented or talked about or act in a non-sexist way, you know? It's very subtle. It's one of those things that's so subtle that if you weren't a bit attuned to it, if you weren't kind of looking for that and trying to avoid it in your stories or whatever, you might not catch it. And it was very subconscious. I didn't realize until I was done with the book that I was bothered by it. So I don't think it's the worst thing ever, but I don't intend on reading any more books in the series. The last thing that I read this week was a short story called Midnight Hour by Robinette Kowal. This is from Uncanny Magazine, and I'll put the link down below. It's about a king and a queen who have made a bargain, a deal to help their kingdom. She is nameless. Nobody remembers her name, and she or her husband who do cannot say her name out loud, and her husband is mad. He's insane. He acts crazy for all hours of the day except for 1 hour. He's only lucid for 1 hour. They're trying to keep the terms of this agreement, and then a prince and an ambassador from another kingdom comes and is poking his nose in their business and threatening this deal, and they have to take care of him. I didn't explain that very well. This was a really impressive short story. I like the twist on the magical spell, the magical bargain story from like fairy tales or whatever. It's kind of dark and it's not nice. And I kind of wondered if these characters of this nameless queen and this mad king had made the right decision, especially given how the story ends. It's like, is this a good thing or a bad thing? It depends on maybe what perspective you look at it. So yeah, I really like the story. I definitely recommend it. I'm currently reading a couple of things on my phone. I am listening to the audiobook version of You're Never Weird on the Internet, Almost, by Felicia Day. I'm a little more than halfway through it, and I'm really enjoying this, so when I finish it, I'll talk about it some more. I'm also reading The Water Knife by Paolo Bacigalupi. It's kind of gruesome and terrifying, and while I really enjoy the subject matter, it's a bit difficult for me to get through right now. I need to read something funny, so listening to Felicia Day is probably a good idea. And I am also reading the second volume of The Unreal and the Real Selected Stories by Ursula Guin. I'm a little ways into that. Would like to finish this coming week so I can get started on the other books I bought by her, which I will be showing in a book haul video this coming week. I think that's everything I'm reading right now. I've really been losing track of things this weekend, so yeah, that's everything that I read and what I'm currently reading. If you have any thoughts about these, please let me know in the comments down below. And hope you guys are having a good weekend and that you have a great upcoming week. Cross fingers. It's less stressful for me too. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you guys again in my next video. Bye.